Alright, so reviewing a hand from PokerStars, 50 cent a dollar, $100 buy-in. So we have 130 big blinds going in this hand. We have a limp from a villain who is effectively at the low jack. This particular villain, 30% VPIP, 6% raise, 1% 3-bet. So this is a pretty nitty opponent through 5,000 hands, -5 big blinds per 100 hands. That's their loss rate. So they're losing 5 big blinds per 100 hands played through 5,000 hands. Whenever you're playing 30% of hands pre-flop, that's too wide, and they're only coming in as the aggressor 6% of the time. Only 3-betting 1% of the time. That's just way too tight. Ace King in the button. Great hand, great starting position. Go ahead and open raise pot, standard. There, we get a call from the small blind again. You study proper poker strategy. You realize that you should not be calling from the small blind. It's 3-better fold spot pre-flop. This particular villain, 2,000 hands played, roughly break-even player. 30% VPIP, 12% raise, 2% 3-bet. So they're not 3-betting very wide, and they are calling pretty wide. So, and then we go ahead and get a call from the other villain here. So it goes 3-way to the flop. And like I said, these players both, doesn't matter what they had starting pre-flop, they obviously did not play it well. Now, the interesting thing here, your opponents both have pretty wide ranges. So, we know that it's unlikely they have pocket aces, pocket kings, because that's probably their 3-betting range. Neither of them have a very wide 3-betting range, but, I would assume that one of them would have, done something more aggressive there. Now, here on this flop, we have 2, 3, 4 with 2 hearts. So we have a gut shot. I'll call it a gut shot. If a 5 hits, we have a straight. If it goes heart, heart, then we get the nut flush, so that's a backdoor flush draw. We also have 2 overcards, so it's a pretty strong hand, not a bad flop for us. 3-way, it's a little bit weird. In position, though, I think a c-bet might be fine, or a check. Now, interestingly enough here, we do get a donk bet here from this villain, so they limp call, and then they go ahead and donk bet here, and their sizing is a little bit more than half pot. A lot of people do this lead bet into the aggressor on the flop whenever they hit a marginally strong hand. Here, what that might look like would be like overpairs, maybe like pocket 5s, pocket 6s, pocket 7s, which also you think pocket 5s, you also have the inside straight draw, and, block our straight. But, obviously that's just a part of their range. Maybe like ace 4 offsuit, maybe a flush draw. That's not as likely. You do have the ace blocker, but even so, the sizing's a little bit big. So it could be someone who actually hit a hand and just wants to get money in, doesn't want to risk the flop checking through. It's again like it's not a very strong play to limp call and then lead into someone. I don't mean like his range can't be strong here, because he actually has more pocket 2s, more pocket 3s, more pocket 4s in his range, more 5, 6 in his range than I do. So if you're looking at it from like a strictly GTO standpoint, this flop actually isn't necessarily bad for him. I think he may have more nut hands here, although my range is still probably better because I have more nut flush draws, I have more overpairs and stronger overpairs. I do what I do a lot of the time in these situations when someone leads into me and I'm the pre-flop aggressor, and that's just to go ahead and raise them, because it's my range should be a lot stronger than theirs, and just get people to fold out a lot of their equity. So I go ahead and do that. Small blind here folds. We get a call from this player. Now we get an ace here, so I'm thinking I'm good a lot of the time, unless this opponent didn't decide to just shove on the flop, and they're kind of slow playing a set, or 5-6. I'm going to be good a lot of the time here. It is an interesting spot because now we have a big pot and we have top pair, top kicker. Do we want to try to get more value in? I think the opponent's going to fold out a lot of their weaker hands here, like their they're overpairs, like a pocket sevens, they might just fold out. Ace four there, obviously in much better shape than I am, but like, and it's kind of what pairs do they have? I mean, do they really have something like 6-4 offsuit, or because it's a 2-3-4 board, it's kind of what do they actually have here? If it's like a 10 high board, or say like a queen 9-4 board, like people lead in with 9-10 a lot of the time, so it's kind of easy to just say, okay, that's a big part of their range is that middle pair. I don't think there's a lot of middle pair in my opponent's range here. And given how big the pot is, I actually don't hate pot controlling here. I forget what I did, but I don't think a check back is necessarily the worst thing. You have a strong hand, but not the nuts, and I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out what my opponent's going to call with here that I have beat. No, don't get me wrong, I still do think they will call with stuff like pocket sevens a fair amount of the time, but, like, you're a little bit worried about them slow playing really strong hands, and you just have so much showdown value here, and it's showdown value on a hand that you don't want to get all in with. So, kind of interesting. I think, he leads again. So, interesting that this opponent leads, and then I bet, and then instead of just jamming or folding, they call, and then they lead again. So it's, like if that ace doesn't help my opponent's range at all, or at least it shouldn't, unless, like I said, unless they're playing ace four. It's a peculiar move. Obviously just a fishy move, but I opt to call. Could I find a fold there? I don't know. Kind of interesting, but alright, so we get to 10 here on the river, so we get ace 2, 3, 4 on the board. Any 5, and I think pocket 5s is in this villain's range. So any 5 has a straight. That puts us in a bad spot. I also think that there are aces up is in this villain's range, so ace 4, ace 2, ace 3, ace 10, not as likely. Ace 5. This villain has a range, and look, whenever people lead into you, like, a lot of the time it's them telling you how strong they are, and like I said, because this was a three-way pot, because the sizing was a little bit bigger on the flop, and because they led again on the turn, this isn't the conventional, I'm going to donk to see where I'm at, or I'm going to donk, donk meaning lead bet whenever you weren't the aggressor on the previous street. I'm gonna lead out here, to figure out if I'm good or whatever. This is more like someone who just doesn't know how to get value in properly. That's what it feels like at this point. So the villain jams the river here, and it's one of those spots where, because of how they played the hand, and people, like I said, people will tell you how strong they are whenever they're leading out, and whenever their sizing is smaller, like, they're usually not as strong. Whenever they do it for one street, usually not as strong. But if someone leads out 3 straight streets after having called a raise on the flop, it's just hard for me to imagine they have anything other than the nuts here. And I made a call here, and I made a really bad call. I don't think I thought this one through properly while I was playing at the time. And you know what, maybe that's just, like, hindsight bias, knowing that I lose this hand, but for the reasons I laid out, this isn't a conventional, like if the turn went check, check, and then the villain bets out here, I think it's going to be a call a lot of the time. Maybe not if they shove, but, if the turn went check, check, and they bet out half pot, 2/3 pot, or, small bet, whatever, like up to 3/4 pot, I think it's a pretty easy call. I think the lead bet in is a pretty easy, raise. I think the turn, like as played that they let out on the turn, I think it's probably fine to call turn. The thing that I've learned from playing a lot of online poker is people will not, it's very rare that people will value bet light and like really value own themselves, or that people will bluff multiple streets. Like a common move I have is, if I open raise from middle position, I get called from late position, and I hit a strong hand, I may c-bet the flop, and then just check the turn with the intention of bluff catching. and then even if I have a relatively strong hand, I may check fold the river because it's so rare that people will fire that second bullet. People will try to steal all the time, and it's such a bad poker player move that I'm going to call from late position because I have the positional advantage, and I want to see a flop, and I want to see hands, and I want to play poker. And then the flop comes, and I don't know, maybe they have an overcard or a backdoor draw, and they're like, I want to see what happens. I want to stay in the hand. So they call your c-bet. And then the turn comes, and they don't improve, and you check to them, and they think, oh, this person checked. I can just steal the pot now. And that's why I love checking the turn with those strong hands and just letting them own themselves. That was kind of a tangent and an aside there, but anyway. This is, so, in this particular spot, the villain jamming here, it's not them bluffing. Like, it's just, like I said, because they have let in the previous two streets, I find it very hard to believe that they're bluffing. Heart draws are their only bluffs, really. I find it, it takes a special kind of person to bluff there. And like I said, this player only 3-bets 1% of their hands. Do you really think that they're jamming river as a bluff? Person who's probably too afraid to 3-bet pocket queens pre-flop. This is an anonymous person. I can shit talk them. Don't worry. But anyway, it really is just the other person telling you what they have, and it's me playing 8 tables at a time and not thinking through things properly and being curious and making a call here. But you shouldn't be curiosity calling 75 big blinds. That's just stupid, and that's how you end up with losing sessions, because those mistakes are just hard to recover from. And the opponent here has 4 or 5. So, it's just, there's a 4-runner to a straight on the board. So it's curious. I think it makes total sense that my raise on the flop didn't knock them off their hand, because you have an inside straight draw on top pair, you're not going to fold. And then on the turn, they hit the straight, and they, rather than check raising, they want to lead in. And it kind of worked on me. Because, that card improved my hand, too. And then the river, they jam. Because there's a 4-runner to a straight on the board, it just, like I said, there aren't busted draws, and nitty players don't. And it's, kind of important to know that this is a very nitty player. Nitty players aren't gonna bluff multiple streets. They're not gonna do stuff like that. They're probably not even gonna value on themselves with ace queen or something like that. There, I don't even think they bet with 2 pair or set there because of the 4-runner to a straight on the board. So I think, if you got a 4-runner to a straight, you've got so much potential for 2 pair. It's just. I just shouldn't be calling there with anything other than a 5. So it's bad play on my part, but it's also just an interesting example of how, you get these fishier players playing their hands certain ways. And I think it's, the key to winning in poker, I think, is to understand just good, fundamentally sound poker strategy. It doesn't have to be GTO precisely, but just understanding good starting range charts, when to c-bet, when not to c-bet, where your hand stands as far as, going for value, that sort of thing, and then just understanding how to deviate based on specific opponents, and just understanding the player pool and, how opponents play. So, kind of an interesting example of a weird play by an opponent.